Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we're diving into a really powerful sermon that asks a pretty tough question. In a world like ours, what does faith actually look like in action? So let's just jump right in. This sermon kicks off with this really jarring contrast that you can find right in the church calendar. You've got December 25th, the peak of celebration, and then just 3 days later, it flips to a day of intense mourning. And, this isn't just some coincidence. The sermon argues that the joy of Christmas is fundamentally tied to this much darker story, the commemoration of what's called Holy Innocents, when King Herod ordered the massacre of children. So here's how it plays out according to the sermon. You have the birth, then the wise men show up and talk to Herod, and boom, Herod reacts with extreme violence. The point is, the moment something truly new and divine enters the world, the existing empire feels threatened and lashes out. And this is a really key insight from the sermon. The argument isn't that Herod was just some cartoonishly evil guy. It's that he was driven by something very real and very human, the fear of losing his grip on power. Okay, so from this ancient story, the sermon makes a huge pivot right into the modern day. It uses this story of Herod to diagnose what it sees as a major problem with the church today. And wow, here it is. This is the core critique, and it's pretty blunt, right? To compare the modern church to a valley of dry bones, basically a symbol of death and irrelevance. This is absolutely meant to be shocking. Now, to really get why this metaphor is so heavy, you have to know where it comes from. It's a famous vision from the prophet Ezekiel, and it represents a whole community that has completely lost its spirit, its hope, its very reason for being. So this isn't just some vague complaint, you see. The sermon gets super specific. It argues that the church has become dry bones because it's gotten too cozy with worldly power, that it looks alive but is spiritually dead, and that it's just not doing its fundamental job of bringing life and hope to the world. All right, so that's the diagnosis. But how did it get this way? What's the root cause here? That's the next big question the sermon really dives into. And the answer brings us right back to where we started, with Herod. The argument is, just like him, when an institution gets scared of losing its status, its influence, its comfort, it starts making compromises. It aligns itself with power instead of challenging it. And this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? It shows this fundamental clash of two totally different ways of operating. On one side, you have this kingdom built on love and peace, and on the other, an empire built on fear and control. The sermon says you have to choose which one you're a part of. Okay, so after all that heavy diagnosis, you might think it's all doom and gloom, but it's not. The sermon pivots again, and this time it's all about the solution. It's about how to bring those dry bones back to life. And this is it. This is it. This is the big idea. Live as resistance. It's about reframing faith not as something passive you just believe, but as an active, spiritual protest against all the negative stuff in our culture. So how do you do that? Well, the sermon lays out this kind of 3-step path. First, you have to consciously break away from the desire for worldly power. Second, you open yourself up to a spiritual renewal. And third, you step up and become a leader for hope and peace in the world. Okay, so living as resistance sounds kind of big and abstract, right? Well, the sermon breaks it down into 4 really practical things you can actually do. 4 protests of faith. First up, hope. In a world that can feel pretty despairing, the idea is to actively push back, to create community, and be an intentional source of hope for people who feel alone. Number 2 is peace. And this isn't just about big wars. It's about protesting the everyday violence, even the verbal violence in how we talk to each other. It's about speaking up peacefully when you see harm being done. Third one is joy. This one's interesting. It's a protest against consumerism. You know that feeling that you always need more stuff to be happy? The countermove here is to find genuine joy in being still and being satisfied with what you have. And finally, number 4, love, but not some passive, feel-good love. The sermon describes an active love, one that stands up to hate and injustice, but also shows grace, even to your enemies. It's a tough one. And to really hammer this point home, the sermon uses this wild modern image. It asks, who is doing the work of Christ today? And the answer it gives is the dinosaurs. It points to protesters in these inflatable dinosaur suits who physically get between clashing groups. So in the end, it leaves you with this choice, this incredible visual. On one side, you have the dry bone, silent, safe, but ultimately irrelevant. And on the other, you have the inflatable dinosaur, active, brave, maybe a little weird, but standing for something. And that's really what this whole thing comes down to. This one final, challenging question for all of us to think about. What is faith for? Is it supposed to be a private source of comfort? Or is it a public call to get in the way of injustice, a call to resist?